welcome to this session. Let's start by welcoming the gang. This is DJ, this is Laura Lee, and this is Marco. Please give them another warm welcome. First of all, I kind of want to chat with you all a little bit about, I guess, finding your sound. There's quite a lot of nuance in the sound that you all have created for yourself. And I wonder, I guess first of all, is it intentional? And then maybe can you give us any glimpse into what that dialogue was like when you're really beginning to forge this sound?
I don't know if there was an intention to be any one thing. I think the intention was just to sort of be us. I think maybe sometimes where I've gone wrong in the past creatively, no matter what medium it is if I'm trying to sound or make something like something else. So I think for me it was an exercise in playfulness.
For me it's, I had been playing guitar in so many different groups and having to, have this massive pedal board and sound like everybody else, to work, right? Gigging as much as you can. And then for this one, it was like, I don't want to do that. I just want to play guitar. I don't want to have to use loopers or play to a track or play to a click or anything. I know it's kind of odd to say at a technological event like this, but it was very anti, like I didn't want to use any of that stuff. Still used Ableton throughout the creative process because we would record and then chop things up and move things around, which makes it really easy to do that. And then you learn that, and then that's what you play. You just learn that arrangement.
I think the other thing about the way that we write is that we each have a chance to sit with each song individually. We don't write in one room together. I sit by myself and write my part as well as each of us do. Ableton actually gives us that opportunity. But I think that's how we create the sound that we do, is that we each have our own time and space to make it what we want, to add our own flavor, I guess.
So what was the period of time though that it took for you to kind of, I guess, come together and find this notch, find this groove that clearly exists across the records that you put out so far? What's the amount of time that took? Is it just in the chemistry of you coming together, or did you have to work at this thing?
I think it might just be the chemistry of us working together. Okay. The very first recordings still sound like Khruangbin. It's I think it has to do a lot to do with the limitations that we put on ourselves. Like you play in this scale. I use reverb on stuff. I'm not worried about filling up all the space with everything, because my role is basically just to play a melody or sing on a guitar. And Laura Lee's got these killer bass lines, so just let her do that. And Deej is just like holding down, playing pocket breakbeats.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. When I've seen you live, you're like incredibly committed to just finding a really tight pocket and sticking in it, like all the way through. Is there a sort of stylistic philosophy for you when you're playing?
Less is more. That's really it. Each song I approach, I try to give the song what it needs. And the way that Khruangbin is structured, it just doesn't need a lot of drumming, in a sense. It just needs something to just be steady and dynamic, more dynamic in our live shows, but when we record, just really consistent. I try to provide that. What's
the inspiration for that? I know you said that you were playing a load of sessions before the band. What kind of playing were you doing before Khruangbin?
I've played in several different settings, from gospel to hip hop, and on different instruments as well. Some settings I was playing, when Mark and I played together, I was on organ. I've played bass in some settings, and drums was really the one thing that I never really played much, even though it's my first instrument. But yeah, I never really played it much, so when we started Khruangbin, it was a way for me to get back to my roots in a sense. And I wasn't really, when we recorded our first record, I was severely out of shape. Like, so a lot of the stuff that I was playing, I was modifying to be able to play it, because, you know, playing a 16th note pattern on a hi-hat for someone who doesn't play every day sounds a little like tight-ropey. And I think that contributed to the loose sound of a lot of the patterns that I played. So it worked out. So now that we're playing 1 million shows a year, I have to go, and I'm in shape now, I have to go back and kind of pull back and, in a sense, try to learn what I did when I played it when I was out of shape. So it's a bit of an exercise, yeah.
That happens a lot with us. Like, we'll tend to record a song. Usually what you hear on the record is maybe the second or third take, because we've learned the arrangement that we did on our own in Ableton or whatever, right? And so then we learn the song, and what you hear in the record is like second or third take, and then we don't play it until the record comes out, and then we kind of have to like relearn the song, because we know we've heard it every day since then, but we haven't played a lick of the song since then. So before we go on tour, we usually have to sit down and learn the tunes. Be like, how did I do this? And how do I do this and now sing over it? Because the singing comes later, you know what I mean? Like, we don't write with lyrics first, it's always the music first.
I guess you've got form in doing that, though, having played as a session player. I'm kind of fascinated by that idea that you used to play loads of sessions for loads of different types of music, yeah. And now you've kind of filtered it right down into this very stripped back way of playing. Do you kind of at the weekends, do you have to go and play Pantera riffs on your own at home or something?
I miss playing
that would be
Zydeco.
so awesome. I love to walk in on that.
I mean, it's fun. I love playing that kind of stuff. But I was never a metal guy, you know. I played mainly like hip hop, gospel, a lot of Zydeco. Played a lot of Zydeco. That was fun. Yeah.
You told me the other day that your guitar playing, you kind of play guitar to Laura's bass parts rather than the other way around. How does that work?
Well, she's got a really strong melody.
It's because the songs start with me, and I think it works. I mean, especially in the beginning, because this is my first band, and I had barely been playing bass when we started the band. So in some ways, it was like, to use a karate analogy, as a white belt, you think of things, or you do things that you would never do if you're a black belt, because you've already crossed that threshold. Right. So, you know, Mark was really eager for me to just do what I did, because it's sort of like a child, you know. You're like
beginner's mind.
Beginner's mind. And so I would just record for hours playing over a drum loop, just like over and over, and then he would find the bits that he found particularly interesting on that day, put them together, and then he would play in between what I played. So then it ends up becoming a conversation between the bass and guitar.
Right.
And given how few instruments are in this band, that's sort of the thing.
Yeah, it's very rare for me to play the same note that she's playing. It's also really rare for me to play at the same time that she's playing, so that it sounds like there's more happening than what there is. You know, I'm not just going to start playing fifths against her one, but I can play a third and imply, you know, a chord, even though there's no chord there.
It sounds like this stripped back, like quite minimal aesthetic that you're talking about. You're all fairly committed to it, but is there a world in which you can see yourself bringing in more instrumentation? Like, is there a string section or an orchestra out there in the future?
Maybe. It will always, you know, it will always start here. I think, you know, one of the limitations we want to put on ourselves is we should be able to perform the songs live.
With 3 people.
With 3 people, with just us playing our instruments. So if there is a string section, it's going to be a supplemental texture on the record that you won't miss live. You know.
I mean, if we have the budget to tour with an orchestra, yeah, sure. I mean, that sounds awesome. I mean, some of my favorite soundtracks, like, you know, Ennio Morricone's work for like Sergio Leone films, like, man, it's like a rock band, you know, like the 60s rock combo, you know, with like this choir and then like a string section. That's awesome. I would love to do that. But money, that's what that is.
You mentioned texture, and I think this idea of texture or atmosphere, or especially kind of like space, seems to be something that's quite vivid in your music. Are you talking about that? Is that part of the dialogue?
We're talking about it now, but honestly, when we started, we were just playing, just kind of hanging out as friends, making music, and within that innocence, and the innocence of that process, you stumble upon something, and when you get there, it's like, okay, how do we stay here? So you have a set of rules that we abide by when we record, a set of things that we do and things that we don't do. And as long as we stay within that and explore all the infinite possibilities inside of that box, that's where Khruangbin lives.
Vocals, the way that you mentioned vocals earlier on, the way that you deploy vocals on your tracks seems to do a bit of the heavy lifting there. Like they're not foregrounded at all. No. What are you trying to do with those, especially when you're recording? Who do they come from, and what are you trying to do with them?
They come last. Yeah. So there are no words to any of the songs when the songs are recorded. It's just bass, drums, and guitar. Yeah. And then usually we'll listen to them on a loop, thinking about what they need, and sometimes the songs just tell you what they need. And there were a few songs that needed something else, and those are the songs we put vocals to. We're usually writing sometimes words to fit a melody. We'll kind of hum a melody or hum a sound over that, and then we have to find a word with the right syllables to fit that, and trying to find sonically pleasing words, because certain words just don't sound great when you sing them. Maybe in other contexts, but in Khruangbin.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, Father John Misty can make some word with like 6 syllables sound great, because he's got so many of them. But with us, it's like we don't really need to do all that. Like, we just want to kind of have this atmospheric vocal thing going on. Like White Gloves was just that's 6-bar loop, you know? And we were like, you know what this song needs is, you know, a melody. Because this one wasn't like as melody driven as a lot of the other stuff. It was like chordal. So you need something on top to like be the melody. It's like, well, we could sing, you know? Let's try that.
I feel like there are for me in this sort of Khruangbin musical world, there's something quite visual, quite visually evocative. Are there visual references for you, or am I just projecting my interpretation?
I mean, we record in a barn. I come back to this a lot, but it looks a very specific way, and it's hard not to have that affect the sound.
Where is that? What is this?
It's in Burton, Texas. Population 300 something. It's in between Houston and Austin, and they're just cows and hills, and a barn that is not treated in any way. I mean, it is cold when it's cold.
It's hot when it's hot.
There are bees and mice and all kinds of stuff in it. But it, you know, that visual, I think, influences the music. It's also part of this space that you're talking about. You know, Mark always talks about when you're out in that part of the world or in the country, the sounds that you hear they're not sirens or, you know, air conditioning or like electronics. It's like bugs and, you know, really sort of lovely sounds that you actually don't want to talk over because you kind of want them in it, and they are in our music.
it's like when you're in an isolated recording studio when there's no sound and it's just dead, and that's, that can be very good for what you want. But for us, it's like we like having some, space around us, and we didn't want to go into a recording studio like that. Because it's almost like, because it's so quiet, you feel the need to fill up all the space with stuff. It's like, oh, well, I have this, technological capability to just layer as many tracks as possible. But with Khruangbin, it's like we're in the barn. It's like, oh, I can hear this bird, or I can hear this tree gently scraping against the side of the building. It's like, you know what? Just leave that. I'll play around that. Like when we listened back to Como Te Quiero, and it had the little scraping tree, and you can hear it. And we were like, oh, the take is ruined. It's like, no, it's not. It's perfect. It's exactly what you need.
And I think it contributes to the visual world, because I think, subconsciously it's putting you somewhere.
Yeah.
Like as a listener, if you hear a little kid laughing in the back of the song, or, or bees or whatever it is, it's like all of a sudden you're somewhere in your mind.
Yeah, because we add that stuff later as well. Like I have tons of field recordings from all over the place, so we'll put that into the album as well. Like make a one recording is side A, and it's the continuous recording from the beginning to the end, and then another one's side B, and you put that underneath the music. So there's always some kind of an atmospheric, real location type sound happening underneath all the music.
Yeah, I get the impression, more than the impression, I'm pretty sure that you're voracious consumers of, listeners and consumers of music and collectors of music.
Yeah.
The two of you DJ a bunch as well, and it seems like all of you have got a very switched on ear to a certain sound, but maybe just to music broadly. Is there a link? How do you think that interaction works between you as kind of like almost archivists of music history and performers? How does that interaction work?
I mean, I don't know if I'm an archivist of music history because I'm listening to stuff that people have already, archived.
Well, I mean, I've seen what your Spotify looks like.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, you have. I definitely learned a lot about organization from Laura Lee.
Yeah, I think we're all interested to see how music changes over various boundaries, and like whether they're time or geographical boundaries. And I think Khruangbin in some ways is a discovery in that learning process. Yeah. I mean, Mark's Spotify is subdivided. I mean, it is crazy. It's awesome. It's like continent, then region, then country, then city, then region. It's like,
It just made it easier to do those mixes where it was like, okay, we're going to do the Air Krung where we go from country to country to country. It's like, it made it a lot easier to be like, okay, well, I need something from Zimbabwe. Perfect.
I think because Khruangbin started out as, we were sort of subconsciously being influenced by music from the East that was being influenced from the West, and it sort of became this conversation we're sort of having back and forth between different parts of the world. We started to get into, like, our DJ sets were, starting in one location and then traveling to somewhere next and seeing how music changes, and you can hear it. It's sort of like, instead of beat matching, or just sort of like region matching.
Kind of vibe matching.
Yeah. And it's an interesting study.
Usually what we spin has, funky drums, sweet bass line, and, an awesome melody. So sounds a lot like Khruangbin.
It feels right now like these kind of explorations of music culture specific to certain regions. The work that you've been doing, putting these mixes together, it kind of feels somehow to me like those kind of musical connections are more important than ever to show us that we're one people and connect a lot of dots. Are these just aesthetic concerns to you, or are there ethics for each of you behind these fascinations?
There's definitely a feeling of oneness, especially in our live shows that we do. You know, everyone comes together in one spot and we all participate together. And Mark always likes to remind our audiences that we're all on this tiny little rock together. So there really are more similarities than differences between us. And it's great that Khruangbin can highlight some of those similarities rather than the differences.
All right, well, I don't know about you, but I certainly want to hear these guys play some music.